Welcome to The Better Life with Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston. Join Dr. Pinkston today as she teaches you how an integrative approach to health, combining holistic and contemporary medical information, can lead you to the better life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Mary Ann Pinkston, and this is The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. And today, I'm going to bring you some fantastic information on microvascular health, which is cardiovascular health. We're looking at more than cardiovascular. We're looking at living longer and living better quality of life and health. And a way to do it is bring in Robert Long today, the founder and CEO of Glycocalyx, and talk about glycanage and the glycocalyx. So, this is probably a lot of big words for people that don't understand where you've come from, where you're going, and what this is. But it's truly amazing science. You've worked a very long time with it. Welcome to the show. Please introduce us to the glycocalyx and glycanage and how we can live longer and better. Welcome in.
Well, thank you, Mary Ann. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk to people today about it. How do we put up my slides for those that have the ability to view?
You are ready to go. There they are.
Okay.
And just not to interrupt, but for those of you who are listening to the podcast today, Spotify, iTunes, or whatnot, you may be missing out on some great visuals. Bob has a fantastic slide presentation. If you want to go back to drpbetterlife.com, hit the YouTube link, then you can come back and see all the visuals. Of course, we're going to explain everything. You don't have to, but there is an option to do that. So drpbetterlife.com and hit the YouTube. I'm sorry, Bob, please continue.
No, I appreciate you saying that. So those people that want to view it on YouTube, we've got all our content there with lots of videos. It's the Glycocalyx Research Institute is the YouTube channel. So let me get started. So I have a podcast also that I do weekly, and it's called The Future of Vascular Health. And so what we really try to focus on is, I guess, a lot of science that's new and groundbreaking that typically the consumer, and even we're just now educating the medical community about. It's that groundbreaking. And so what I want to talk about today is the microvascular system. And so I've got a slide here for those that aren't seeing it. And on the one side, it shows 1% with what I call the vascular man. And the vascular man is just an image of when people think about your vascular system, this is what they think about. It shows the heart, shows the kidneys, and then it shows the arterioles, which are red, and those go out, and then it shows the venous side, which are blue. And so essentially, conceptually, what the medical community's been focused on and treating forever is what they know they can see and what they are treating. And so that's really just the large arteries and veins. And so when I first got interested in this 15 years ago because of a personal health scare that I had, what I had is my doctor thought I had a blockage. So they thought, well, we'll go in. This is, 15, maybe even 20 years ago. They thought, we'll just go in. You've got a blockage in one of your large arteries. We'll go in and put a stent, and that will open up the blood flow, and then you won't have that angina that you feel. Anyway, short story, they did that, but there was no blockage that I had. And so the cardiologist that did it came back and said, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And I said, well, what's the good news? And he goes, you didn't have any blockages. And I said, well, what's the bad news? And he said, we don't really know what is causing your angina.
Right.
And so I had just sold a company at that time. And so I had time and I had money. So I decided I wanted to, next chapter of my life, dedicate to figuring out what was wrong with me that the cardiologist couldn't tell me.
Right.
And so I thought I had an artery problem. And so if you look at this slide I've got up, this is what the entire medical community has been focused on the last 70 years. because they can image, they can go in with little cameras, they can go up and see if you've got blockages, they can put stents in. And then if you think about the medical treatment, they either are reducing your cholesterol level, they are reducing your glucose level, or they're thinning your blood so you don't get blood clots and have a heart attack or stroke. But the thing that I soon realized is nobody was focused on what's causing this in the first place.
Right.
And so by accident, I was introduced to the concept of the glycocalyx. And when my friend first told me about glycocalyx, I couldn't even say it. So I had to phonetically spell it out till glycocalyx.
Right.
So probably most of the people in our audience today have never heard of the glycocalyx.
Correct.
But what I'm going to show you is it is probably at the core. In fact, I know it's at the core of most of the things that develop and go wrong in our body as we age. And so the big aha to me as I started down this path of science is I came to learn that nobody was paying attention to your microscopic capillaries. And so most people in our audience today have heard of capillaries and they know those are the smallest of small blood vessels, or the smallest ways that blood gets distributed to the cells in our body. But it's an afterthought nobody thinks about. Correct. And so what nobody thinks about is only 1% of the surface area in your body where blood flows is in the large arteries and veins. The real action where blood flow happens is out in those microscopic capillaries. And so just to give you an idea of the magnitude of those capillaries, they're over 60,000 miles long.
Wow.
You can even imagine that. That's in your body. And then we've now estimated if you were to lay out the surface area of this capillary network, it's in the neighborhood of about 7,000 square feet. So to put that into visual concept of what people would understand, think of the square footage of your house. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens my house is about that size. So it's almost unfathomable to me when I think of my upstairs and I have a full finished basement. Mm-hmm. That's if I walk through my whole house, upstairs and downstairs, that much area is where blood's flowing in this little body of mine.
Right. Wow.
So it's incredible. So when we talk about blood flow is everything, it really is. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, so when I got involved in this, I met the top researcher in the world that was focused on glycocalyx research. His name was Dr. Hans Vink, and he was originally located in the Netherlands at the University of Maastricht. And he was a nuclear physicist, and he had spent already 22 or 23 years studying the glycocalyx. And I'm going to show you some images in a minute. But he's the first person that showed the world that your capillaries and your arteries and veins aren't just hollow tubes. And I'm going to show you what's really in there in just a minute.
Right.
But we started working together about 14 years ago. And together, I'm going to explain today to you about the glycocalyx, what it is, what it does, why it's important. And then I'm going to explain to you about a medical device that we have called the GlycoCheck. And it's the only device in the world that we can measure non-invasively what's happening with your microvascular system, your capillaries, and then give you what we've created, which is called a microvascular health score. And so we've now published, we're well over probably 130 at this point since I did this slide. Even just last week, we published another paper that we've been working on for 3 years. It was on specifically on long haul COVID. And so and the damage that COVID did to people's microvascular system, and we can measure that with our device.
Wow.
And so that's why people are experiencing all these kinds of symptoms. But what we know after doing all these studies is that your body starts to produce these early warning signs. Mm. And so it's kind of like your car. Your car has a warning system. So if something and the computer says something's not right, you get a check engine light. and it tells you better check and see what's off. But if you keep driving it, you're probably going to cause a bigger problem. So your body's doing the very same things. So these are what the early warning signs are to your body. So certain types of skin problems, like psoriasis, for example. Psoriasis is a immune system disorder, but it also has a big impact on your microvascular system, and it's an early warning sign of vascular disease. And so it's certain things will start to appear in your skin. In certain people, particularly women, some types of hair thinning are due to a loss of their microvascular system. Fatigue. Lots of times fatigue is happening because of a breakdown of your microvascular system. Lack of focus or memory loss. If you stop and think about if you've ever looked at images of the brain and seen the capillary, it looks like a huge spaghetti bowl of wires. Those are all the capillaries, and there's over 600 miles of capillaries just in your brain, if you can fathom that. Certain eye problems start to show up. So when you go to your eye doctor, they can already tell if you're hypertensive or if you have type 2 diabetes. They start to see warnings through your eyes. The eye is a window to what's going on. And so it's already alerting people that something else is lurking deep inside your body. Type 2 diabetes is really an early warning sign of, it's really a microvascular disease. Hypertension, I don't know how many, I know it's over 100 million people in the U.S. have hypertension. There's probably more than that are walking around undiagnosed.
Absolutely.
But if you ask your doctor what causes hypertension or why do I have high blood pressure, they really can't tell you unless you have a specific condition, like maybe your kidneys are failing or something. But high blood pressure is an early warning sign that your glycocalyx is breaking down. If you look at erectile dysfunction, if you look at severe PMS in women, it's manifest. These are all microvascular issues. Cold hands and feet, even leg cramps, certain types of hearing loss. These are all early warning signs. And so when I go through these with people, they're thinking to themselves, oh, wow, I've got one or two of those. But more importantly, I'm surprised at the number of people that say, oh, that's what my brother has. Or that's what my mom's got. Or that's what my dad's got. And so their ears perk up because these are all things that happen to everybody as they age, and nobody gives them a good idea of what they can do about it. So it really gets people's attention. So the next thing that happens, and we publish studies on all these conditions and diseases, is if these things go unchecked, then they develop into full-blown diseases. So diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. And heart disease, it comes in a whole bunch of different flavors and shapes. That's a whole topic we could spend on another day. Strokes, dementia, septic shock is really a breakdown of your microvascular system and your glycocalyx. There's tens of thousands of people that die from septic shock that shouldn't be dying. Inflammatory disorders. Every type of inflammatory disorder that's happening in your body can be tied back to the glycocalyx. And then I talked about COVID-19, but here's some examples. So we're now in over 200 academic hospitals around the world. And what we've done is they buy our systems, we teach them the science, and then they do research with us. And that's how come in the last 12 years or so, we've been able to publish so many peer-reviewed papers in major journals. And then they come to us, so what do we do about it? And so right now we've probably got 50 or 60 ongoing studies, maybe more. And these are all funded by major institutions like the Dutch Diabetes Foundation or the Dutch Heart Foundation or Beth Israel Deaconess. So, all kinds of major medical institutes, the Rothschild Foundation, all kinds of institutes, the NIH, the Veterans Administration, the U.S. Army. All these people are funding studies using our GlycoCheck and using our technology and science.
Wonderful.
So what I'm going to show you next, if I can make it work, darn.
Yeah.
This is a video, but I can't see how I would turn it on. If you could see this video, what I'm showing here is this is a 5 micron capillary. And if the video was playing, you would see little individual red blood cells going through. Wow. And then on either side of this, you can see there's a clear space. And then there's a dark line that I'm pointing to. That dark line is a 1 cell thick layer. It's nano thin. It's called the endothelium. And that's the barrier between your capillary and your tissue, or where your cells are. And so what happens is when we look at capillaries, and this was the big eye opener to me, and this is Dr. Vink's original data, was that when these red blood cells are going through, they never touch this little wall, this dark line that you're seeing here. And so everybody prior to these kinds of videos thought that your capillaries, your blood vessels and arteries, I mean, you probably learned this in medical school, Marianne. You didn't know there was some protective barrier in there. You know there was an endothelial cell. You know there was the lumen. You know all the stuff that was in the blood, the monocytes, leukocytes, all that kind of stuff. But you have no idea that this next slide I'll show you, when you blow it up, you'll see this is a blow up of that same 5 micron capillary. Wow. This little dark line, go back, is the endothelium. And then you see it looks like a bushy hair-like structure.
Right.
Those are what we call sulfated polysaccharides, and those are attached to the endothelium. And so if you blow it up, right here would be the 1 cell thick endothelium.
Wow.
And it's less than 0.2 nanometers. And then you can see the glycocalyx structure extends into the vascular system. And then suspended in that is a transparent clear gel. And so that clear gel, along with those little hairy structures, are what are called the glycocalyx. And so the reason nobody, and it took Dr. Vink and Bernard, who still works with us, it took Bernard and Hans about 4 years to be able to figure out an imaging technique to figure out how to capture these, until they got these pictures. And these are the most widely viewed pictures that prove to the world that there is something inside all of your vessels called the glycocalyx. Until this, nobody knew what was there.
And you say there, it's like the Teflon lining of the blood vessels. That creates a good visual. So
yeah. So what when I learned about this, what I kind of said, and then this is what Hans and his team spent the next 20 years before I met him. They were really trying to figure out, okay, we figured out it's there. And then the next thing they had to figure out is, well, why did God put it there? What's it do? Why is it even there in the first place?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going to explain why it's there and what it does. And when you understand what it does, it's going to blow your mind of how it's at the core of everything that affects your health. But you're absolutely right. I used to tell people it's like God's Teflon coating through the body. But then, so it's like if you had a frying pan and it's Teflon coated, and if you scratch it, you put scratches in it, you start using a metal spatula, food will start to stick in those scratches.
Right.
So that's what's happening in your vessels. And I'll show you some more pictures there in a minute. But what I really tell people, it's probably realistically more like Gore-Tex, meaning Gore-Tex keeps the water and the wind out, but yet it lets stuff through. So I'm going to show you some more pictures here and explain what it does. So I can't show it. This video I can't turn on either with this, or maybe I can. No. If you could see this video, it's what with our glycocalyx or glycocheck system. It's a video microscope that goes under your tongue. And I wish I could show this to you, but what you would see is you're going to see under your tongue. We can actually show you real time on the computer screen your blood with the red blood cells and stuff moving through one by one.
Wow.
And we can actually see we measured that down to 4 microns up to 25 microns.
Wow.
And so this, for a patient, is probably the most visual thing they can see. And for even doctors and scientists, they start giggling because it's the first time they've seen their blood flow real time in action in their body. And it's just an incredible experience. And the thing that's so visual about this experience is even a consumer can look at this, and either they're going to have a lot of this network of capillaries and blood flow, or they might have almost nothing.
Wow.
And so it freaks people out when I show them these videos, because this might be the most compliant tool that doctors tell me they use, because it's really hard to get patients to be compliant with treatment programs. But this scares the heck out of people when they see this, because they can see real time, I'm not getting blood flow to a big chunk of my body.
Well, and to equate that, it's like many patients will tell me, well, I feel okay. I know my blood pressure may be high and I'm taking this medicine, but I feel fine. And that is something like this tool allows people to see that there's actual damage occurring even when they feel good, that those are the building blocks to early death.
You're absolutely right. And I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So basically, what the glycocalyx and what we've been focused on is what happens. We start out healthy when we're young. Some of us are more healthy than others. And so all the things that affect our health, natural aging process, our body just starts to break down as we get older based on how good a life we live and how well we take care of ourselves. Things like our diet, people that eat high fat, high carb, high sugar diets, they're putting a load on their body. Certain diseases start to happen that then are beyond our control. Those all have an impact on our glycocalyx. And even our genetics. There are huge genetic differences, and it's borne out in the statistics you see. If you look at the risk factors between white people, Hispanics, Asians, and Black people, they all have different rates of cardiovascular disease rates. They have different rates. It's documentable of diabetes, hypertension, and even your sex. Women have 2 times the cardiovascular risk if they have type 2 diabetes, for example. So even, menopausal, premenopausal, all these things start to affect our health as we age. Things that we do like smoking, you can just imagine what that's doing to your microvascular system and your capillary network.
Yeah.
And then another one that we all live with every day is stress. And stress is a huge part of, sorry.
It's all right.
Is a huge part of effect on our lives.
Right.
So what happens is you can see here up in this first visual, I have that healthy glycocalyx. You can see there's that bush matrix. It's healthy and strong. And then there's the gel. And then the red blood cells going through it. And so what that does is it's exactly what you said. It's really like Mother Nature's Teflon-like coating. And basically, this is where the facilitation of the oxygen, this is how the oxygen gets across into the cells. And this is also how the CO2 is released back to get removed on the venous side as your blood circulates through your body. So that's how all the oxygen is removed. That's how the CO2 is removed. It's also how all of the nutrients, hormones, all of that type of stuff. If you have toxins that you're exposed to, they're extracted through your capillary network and then your organs have to process it and filter it. But this is where it all starts in the body. And so what happens is you'll see this would be a picture of a capillary where the glycocalyx is completely gone. And so it would be, and you can come over here and you can see it's thin everywhere. Mm-hmm. So that's the Teflon coating is gone. So now all the bad stuff can leak through. And so in this case, what's happened is all the fluids, there's nothing to keep them where they're supposed to be. So they've leaked around the vessel. And this is edema. This is what edema looks like. And this is what causes edema. So, you've probably had patients, I know it sounds weird if people have never seen it, but, women particularly, or if women that have had breast cancer and they've had massive treatments, their legs will start to weep. They'll have water that starts to come out of their legs. It's because they've lost all this glycocalyc coating and it's leaking out and it's not compartmentalized any longer. So I guess if I was to, with this cartoon show you, so on the left-hand side over here is the healthy glycocalyx, it's intact. But what happens is as you get inflammation, inflammation causes these one-cell thick endothelial cells become inflamed. And the endothelial cells are kind of like overlapped like shingles on a roof. So you think of an old wood roof. If it's been in the sun a lot, you notice the shingles start to curl, and over time they get cracks and they leak. That's what's happening to your endothelium. And when it gets damaged, then the protective gel layer is destroyed. Fats can penetrate the artery wall. So damage starts to occur. And so the artery wall becomes slack and weak, and you get these bulges. And these would always typically be in points of bifurcation, which I can get into on another podcast on coronary disease. But this is, when they go in and put a stent in, that stent is spring-loaded. So it basically pushes that fat back in so that there's not a chance for a clot right there. So let me talk a little bit about a healthy glycocalyx. So a healthy glycocalyx, if it's thick and strong, it does a lot of important things related to the health of your body. First thing is this is where the antioxidants are stored in your body. So most people on our call have heard a lot about oxidative stress. And I'll ask people, I'll say, well, why is oxidative stress bad? And then when I ask that question, they look at me and they go, I don't know. I just know it's bad. Well, the reason oxidative stress is bad is it's breaking down this glycocalyx. So it makes this glycocalyx disappear and you get holes in it. But when God created our body, he knew that would happen. And so he created natural antioxidants that are stored in this glycocalyx gel. And one of them would be superoxide dismutase. So superoxide dismutase is stored in your glycocalyx. So when oxidative stress comes along, it turns it into catalase, which then zaps it's hydrogen peroxide. It's breaking down the glycocalyx, zaps it into water so it can't attack the glycocalyx. Your body also produces certain types of enzymes, high glucose. All those things break down the glycocalyx. But as long as the glycocalyx is thick, it's really, you can see, it's kind of like a furnace filter. It lets the air through or lets the good stuff through, but the fat, cholesterol, the big molecules can't get through. The stuff that needs to get through to support the cells is able to do that. The oxygen, the nutrients, the hormones, and it keeps the bad stuff out. Right. The next thing that's super important about the glycocalyx, a lot of people have heard about nitric oxide, the importance of nitric oxide. Mm-hmm. This is where nitric oxide, most of it is produced in your body. And the way it's produced is as those red blood cells flow over this matrix. You remember, you can see those little cartoons. It looks like those hair structures. Yeah. What's happening is that forward motion of the red blood cells is actually triggering the endothelium. And the endothelium, as the red blood cells and the blood flow happens, it's the signal to the endothelium to produce nitric oxide. And so a healthy, thick glycocalyx, you produce all the nitric oxide your body needs. The next thing that it does is you've got platelets and monocytes patrolling along. So if you come over here to the right, if you get places where you've got a thin glycocalyx, you can see that these platelets have little antennas. In a healthy person, those antennas are patrolling along and they can never touch the endothelium. Mm-hmm. And so this is what triggers the clotting mechanism. So as long as you have a thick glycocalyx, the adhering platelets, no, they don't have to stop and repair anything. And then you also have the monocytes, but then you start to get inflammation. And when you lose this glycocalyx, that's when the fat, cholesterol, and the bad stuff can start to seep through and do what I showed you in that previous picture.
Right.
So this is exactly what I've come to tell people, and exactly what you were saying a few minutes ago. I've got a beautiful lady looking into a mirror. And what I've come to tell people is you may look and even feel healthy on the outside, but inside your microvascular system, a completely different situation could be development. Correct. And what we've come to recognize is we've termed it organ starvation is one of the reasons that diseases begin in the body. And what organ starvation is when you lose that capillary network or that ability for the blood to be perfused through the entire body. Now your vital organs don't get the nutrients, the oxygen, the hormones. And so it starts a silent spiral of decline. And so I just put together this little spiral of conditions and silent. So over time, due to all things we talked about, you get those early warning signs. And then that progression becomes progressive. And one of the things we'll see, I'll explain to you, that we're able to measure with the glycocheck is the amount of damage that's done. So we can actually predict where you're at 20, 25 years before you have a big event. This is the canary in the coal mine that's sniffing there's poisonous gas happening. You guys got to get out or you're going to die.
Right.
And so this decline happens, then it leads to full-blown diseases. And then when the organs shut down, then complications develop throughout the body and you eventually die. Yeah. That's the spiral of organ starvation. And so what we came up with is Dr. Vink had already been on the path, discovered all the science I'm explaining to you, and he had developed the glycocheck about the time I met him. And the reason he developed the glycocheck is they needed a practical way to be able to look at us as humans on a non-invasive basis and see what's happening to my microvascular system. And so these are the types of images that we get with the camera. I wish the video would play, but I can't play it for some reason. But if you could see this, it's the same video I showed you a minute ago. Mm-hmm. You'll see your actual red blood cells going through. You'll see the number of them. So a healthy person has a whole bunch of small capillaries. An unhealthy person, you almost see no capillaries. And so what I always tell people is, when you were young and healthy and vivacious, you had this many capillaries. But as we age and all these things happen to us, we find a lot of people that are going around and they might only have 30% of their capillary network that's engaged. Wow. So if you stop and think about that, they have no reserve capacity, which means if they need to start exercising, they need to think about a heart problem with the brain. They need to call on more blood flow to an area to support. If you're exercising, you need more blood flow, all those kinds of things. It's really a piping issue. Right. I live in Utah, we irrigate. I know in other some parts of the country they don't have to do that. But, we have big sprinklers for the big areas. And then in my flower beds and stuff, like in my shrubs, I have little drippers.
Right.
And those little drippers, if they work good, they keep my flowers looking beautiful and everything looks spectacular. But, invariably a dripper will break or it'll get plugged or what happens. And as soon as it stops getting water, that area dies. Right. And another example I always tell people is if you're driving around out in farm country and you start noticing fields, especially cornfields, you'll see how the corn is really high. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to the end of the row, it starts to go yellow and then it dies out. Well, that's the same thing that's happening in your body. The stuff's not getting to the end of the row.
So if I think sometimes people imagine that if this is happening and their glycocalyx is dying off and, the aging is happening, the disease process is happening, is it something that can be reversed? Is it something that people, if they take action now, can they actually make this better and save themselves?
That's exactly the good news about it. And so I can explain more about how we measure, and maybe that's more detail than you'd like to go into. I can skip ahead to what you do about it if you want.
Well, yeah, I think it's as you like, but I think it's important people know that, it can be measured, that we can take it. That's what this presentation is for folks to know that we can take a look at this dying off process, see how healthy you are or how unhealthy you are, or something that you can't see happening from the outside, but know that now we can find this on the inside and then actually do something about it, that it's never too late.
Right. So what we actually do, and so the good news is we can measure this in people, but they don't have to be measured. If they've got these early warning signs, it's a clear indication that what I've been talking about is happening. But what happens with the GlycoCheck devices, we get thousands of videos of the blood flow in these capillaries and vessels under your tongue. And then our algorithms actually measure the movement of the red blood cells, and we quantify the size of the vessels that you've got in your body. Mm-hmm. And people always go, well, how can you know under the tongue what the health of my whole body is? Well, the glycocalyx, if I ask people, what's the largest organ in your body? The answer is typically going to be your skin.
Right. That's what we've learned.
Actually, the biggest organ in your body is the glycocalyx, because it's through your entire vascular system, as I told you, the size of it.
Yes.
And so what we know, and we've actually done studies where we actually put our camera on the brain, on the heart, on the lungs, on the kidneys, and the measurements we get there are the same as we get under the tongue. And so the glycocalyx is the largest systemic organ in the body. So we know that what we get under the tongue, and we validated it in the 125 plus studies that we've done, and we've correlated it to blood results, all kinds of other markers. So what we get under the tongue is indicative of what's happening in your systemic body.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into this. So basically what we're measuring with the GlycoCheck, and one of the measurements that we have, it's part of our patent, is what we call the perfused boundary region. So as we take those videos, we're actually looking at the movement of the red blood cells as they move inside the vessels, particularly in the capillaries, which are 4, 5, and 6 microns. And in true capillaries, the red blood cells go through one by one, because a red blood cell is 7 microns. Mm-hmm. So anything bigger than 7, they start going by 2 by 2, 3 by 3. They get bigger and bigger. But in a capillary, they go through one by one. And so what we're actually measuring is how close they get to that wall. Mm-hmm. And how close they get to that wall is how we measure how much inflammation or how much damage is done to your glycocalyx.
Gotcha.
And so then we create what we call a microvascular health score, and this is what it looks like. So we basically tell you how many 4 micron capillaries are functional, how many 5 micron capillaries are functional, how many 6 micron capillaries. We then tell you how much is your blood flow, and then we can tell you if you exercise, how much, what's the dynamic, how many capillaries that are just sitting there without blood in them. Mm-hmm. If you start, what's your engagement factor? How many capillaries can you engage? So if only 3 of them have blood flow and I start exercising, can I get blood to go to 5 more? Can I get it to go to 7 more? Can I get it to go to 8 more? Can I get it to go to 10 more? And that's really important as we age to see what's happening to us.
Right.
And then we measure what's your PBR like, so we can get a baseline score on people. And then so what do we do about it? I'll talk to you about here in a minute. How are we doing on time, by the way, Marianne?
Well, we're about 40 in, so we probably got about 10 minutes left.
All right. So this will be a good stopping off point then. And so we've got this, so what do you do about it? And we can talk about that on another podcast, but I'll touch on it. So we can get a baseline score, and then we can test people, and then we can show them what to do about it. And I won't go into this today because we don't have the time, but we have all kinds of studies that are linked to pretty much every disease I told you about in the body. And we've correlated the loss of the glycocalyx, the high level of the low PBR level is all correlated with what happens in every disease. And so, this was a study that we did in Greece, for example. I'll just touch on this one. This was with a 6-year study that we did at the University of Athens in the Cardiovascular department. This is a study we published in 2021 in the Journal of Cardiovascular Translational Research. Mm-hmm. So what we did is we tracked 600 people over 6 years. And so we looked at all the known factors of how they measure cardiovascular risk. We looked at their Framingham risk score. We looked at new onset of untreated diabetes. We looked at family history. We looked at if they were, if they had diabetes. We looked at if they were on lipid-lowering agents and all those types of things. Yeah. And then we measured their PBR, which was the measurement of the thickness of that glycocalyx. Mm-hmm. And we tracked everybody over 6 years. And what we found is if their glycocalyx was damaged, so over 2.10, they had a 5-fold increase risk for a heart attack or stroke. So 6 years before, there were 52 or 54 people that had events in this 6 year as out of the 600. Yeah. And they either had a stroke or a heart attack. There were 54, and we predicted 6 years in advance those people that would have a heart attack or stroke using the glycocheck.
Wow. That's powerful.
That's very powerful, if you want to know. But yeah. I want to know. That's why I went into this thing. Sure. I'm 71, but I'm still healthy. I don't feel like I'm 71.
Right.
I want to live till I'm as long and healthy and keep going as long as I can.
Absolutely. So this is, looking at the glycocalyx can do that. And I think most people, when they go to their physician, they get their blood pressure checked, they get, their labs checked. Doctor looks through the medication, says, well, your meds are holding your labs okay. But when you walk out of there, you do not really know what your timeline is of how well you're doing and how, if you are going to, succumb to some of these diseases. It's kind of a guessing game for doctors. And something like this takes the guess out of it. You can tell people, whether they are going to live longer or if an event or something is coming.
Right. And so the part of the reason, most all the research that we've done, there's, tens of millions of dollars in research going on, and it's all funded by governments. So, this is right in line with what the new administration is focused on, is how do we make Americans healthy again? Absolutely. It's scary. When I started on this 12 or 14 years ago, mm-hmm. in the U.S., 1 in 9 people had kidney disease. Yeah. You realize that today it's 1 in 7?
Absolutely. And getting worse.
And it's predicted it's going to be in 1 in 5 in 5 more years. And the scary thing is, I can't tell you the number of people I tested with the glycocheck, mm-hmm. and they have a bad score. And I ask them, well, tell me more about and I'll ask them, do you know what your GFR is? Well, your GFR is a measurement of your kidney's filtration rate, how well your kidney's working.
Yes.
And I said, well, next time you go to your doctor, ask them what your GFR is. Have them run that test.
Yeah.
And I have picked up so many people that are stage 3 or 4 in Absolutely. Kidney failure, and it's not even on their doctor's radar. He's still worried about what their cholesterol level is. Absolutely. And then by the time it shows up, the current message is it's too late. You got to go on dialysis or you got a kidney transplant.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to show you some stuff in our next podcast.
Yes.
The cool thing of what I've been telling you about today. So hopefully what our audience takes away is this hard word that it takes a while to learn how to say, glycocalyx, and then your microvascular system. Yes. It might be the most important thing that's happening in your body. And it's the early warning sign that's telling you what the real health is. And, so people will say, well, my brother-in-law, the guy was the healthiest guy in the world. He jogged, every day. He was a runner. He's over our house for Christmas Eve, and he dropped dead with a massive heart attack, and he's laying under the Christmas tree. I hear these horror stories all the time. And it's so, why do people that look so healthy die, and nobody can explain why?
Right.
It's all because this thing we've been talking about today breaks down. And so what I want to talk to you about on our next podcast, because we're out of time today, is we have two novel things that we've brought to market.
Absolutely.
And it's the GlycoCheck, but then I'm on my third generation of product because on my quest became, first of all, it was self-preservation because the doctors couldn't tell what was wrong with me.
Right.
But then it became my personal mission to change the trajectory of health. Because if I could measure people and get their score, and when I met Dr. Vink, he was focused on the science and all the stuff to do about it. So when I went and met him, 14 years ago in the Netherlands, I told him I had been focusing on this. So what do you do about it?
Right.
And so I explained to him what we were doing. And he goes, Bob, I knew somebody would come up with a solution, but I always figured it'd be a drug company. And he said, I never even realized that you could take natural ingredients and restore the glycocalyx. So I told him what I was doing, and we've been partners since that time, and we've continued to progress the science. And now I'm on my third generation product called Vascular. It's the most powerful product yet by a large margin. And that's what I'd like to come back and explain to your patients next week, or not your patients or your people on your program, because the good news, and I'll be honest with you, when I had that incident with my personal health with my doctor, and when he told me I had got good news and you got bad news, and then he wrote out a whole bunch of prescriptions, and I said, I think he wrote out 5 prescriptions, and I said,
my goodness, yes.
And I said, well, how many of those? How long do I have to take these? And he goes, oh, the rest of your life,
forever.
And then I went home, and Google was just getting going then, and I Googled all these things, and it's just like the ads you listen to on TV. They tell you what it does. Then they take another 5 minutes and tell you all the things that might happen to you when you take them.
Right.
And so I just felt that I had an obligation, not only to myself, but to all the thousands of other people in the world to figure out what do we do about it? And that's what Hans and I have been working together to do the last 15 or so years.
Which we love, and I'm so glad. And I think the takeaway is that, yes, there are some great medications out there. Yes, you need to talk with your doctor and see what works for you individually. But I think what people miss in most doctors' offices, which is such a shame, is that there is more that you can do for yourself from a diet, exercise, and a nutritional, supplement perspective. And that there are solutions for you out there that you can do to save yourself instead of sit on a prescription for the rest of your life, because prescriptions do not save you. They may slow disease, they may take a portion of the risk out of it, but really the power is in your hands to eat well, to exercise, and get rid of some of the bad toxic effects of some of the things you're doing, smoking and overuse of alcohol and things like that. But then there is a nutritional side to it. And Vascular, you are right, is a fantastic product, and we are
right. And so I would concur with you 100%. Prescriptions are a godsend. They do wonderful things, but there's things that you can do if you. The thing that's miraculous, and I'll just leave it at this, and we can end, is what I believe and what I've come to know for a fact is the way God made our body is it's self-repairing.
Yes.
And it really wants to repair itself. It wants to be healthy. It wants to maintain itself. Yes. But it needs our help because we need to give it what it needs to do that. Right. And that's what I set out on my quest to do, is what did God create in nature that basically, because if you think about it, most pharmaceuticals or drugs start as a natural compound in nature, and then they're synthesized so that they can be produced in mass. Correct. And part of the reason the side effects happen is because of that process where you take it from a natural ingredient and turn it into a synthesized product.
Absolutely.
So what I was focused on is, could I find the natural ingredients that God put there that could be intended for my body, that then would allow my body to heal itself? And that's what I've been focused on.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that on our next podcast when you have me.
You are a hero. We will do this very soon. Thank you so much, Bob, for being on. And yes, I'm going to put more information. I know you've got some information. Maybe you can tell us where people can find more information on glycocalyx, Vascular, and everything.
Yeah. So if they want to go to glycocalyx.com, we've got a website. You can read all our studies. You can read all about our products.
Great.
You can also go to glycocheck.com, and you can read all about the GlycoCheck. There's a finder. We're starting to put these outside of research hospitals. We've got about 45 locations in the U.S. right now, and we're adding them every month. Yeah. So if you want to get tested, there's a place you can go get tested, and you can learn more about our products and our science.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, you've got a great podcast, and you can go to that link. You can find all of this information. I will have it posted on my website at drpbetterlife.com. And if you'll scroll to the bottom there on the YouTube, go to my YouTube TV network, and you can go down and you can find the link to his podcast and get lots of great information. So find more on the website, find more on the YouTube link, and watch the show. We're going to have way more to go on this, and I appreciate you so much, Bob. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Marianne, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And you as well. And everybody have a great weekend.
You've been enjoying The Better Life with Dr. Marianne Pinkston. For more information, go to drpthebetterlife.com. That's drpthebetterlife.com. And listen next week for The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.